wants to go to Rome. He wants to go stand before Caesar and shift the world, not just a nation. And if it means going through as a prisoner to get there, he's okay with that because he saw what Joseph did. See, Joseph came through the prison into the palace, and Paul believed it was possible for him as well. And so he comes upon this storm. He said, man, we shouldn't set sail. It's dangerous waters. Y'all going to die. I want you to catch this. Paul says to him, if you set sail, we're going to die. Now the storm is raging. It says, when they had gone a long time without food, then Paul stood up in the midst and said, men, you ought to have followed my advice. How many of you guys ever had a I told you so moment? So Paul basically stands up middle of the tossing rock. I told you. You didn't listen. You should have followed my advice and not to have set sail from Crete and incurred this damage and loss. Yet now, I urge you to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. Now, Paul had said earlier, if we set sail, you guys are going to die. Does that make his previous statement untrue? Something has shifted in the atmosphere. In the natural, he knew if we set sail, there's going to be a storm and we are going to die. See, Paul was still going to get to Rome. That was going to happen regardless. But since they set sail, see, the favor of God was on Paul's life. And so because the favor of God was on Paul's life, and the plan of God was on Paul's life, and the plan of God had not come to fruition, that meant that God had to save all the other ones who didn't listen because of the one that was listening. Some people tell me I don't got to go to church to be a good Christian. No, but when a storm hits you, you need someone around you that's carrying favor and a plan. When a storm hits, I'm going to get close to somebody that's not done yet. That's what I want to do. I want to get around someone that's still on plan when a storm hits my life. And the best place to be is under the favor of a group of people who walk in alignment with God and say, I'm going to get real close to you. And whatever favor's on your life, I'm going to walk in your favor as well as my favor. We need to start sharing our favor. When a storm comes, I'm looking for someone with an umbrella, amen? And I'm going to get real close to them. Some of you are soggy Christians because you don't know how to get around people with the favor of God over their life. The covering of God on their life. And so Paul, because of the favor of God on his life, he was able to say, God has told me I'm not done, so therefore you're not done. And so salvation had come because of the favor on Paul's life here. Now, why did Paul shift from, if we leave, there's going to be a storm, it's going to be a deadly storm, it's going to destroy the ship. I mean, that's loss of life. Everything in the natural says this means certain death. But suddenly Paul shifts. We find out in the next verse here. For this very night, an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood before me, saying, well, I want you to get this. Paul's angel showed up. Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who are sailing with you. Some people, they challenge me on this one. This is the verse that sells this. Why did Paul constantly get himself thrown in prison? You ever notice that when Paul stands, he's always getting beaten, stoned, and whooped up on and thrown in jail? You ever notice he does that? And it's not until he's in jail that he goes, you always treat Roman citizens this way? They come up to him and like, this rebel rouser is causing a bunch of problems. And he sits silent. They beat him. They ask him questions. They throw him in jail. And then the next day he's like, you always treat Roman citizens this way? And they're shocked and they're freaked. Oh my gosh. We have beat a Roman citizen without due process. So you could beat anyone else, just not Roman citizens. Without due process. Couldn't Paul have said that earlier in the conversation? Someone said, well, they were too busy beating him. I don't care how bad you are beating me. I'm like, I'm a Roman, I'm a Roman, I'm a Roman. Wouldn't you find a second to yell that out? When you saw the guards coming up looking all angry like this, with the baton, you'd be like, I'm a Roman, I'm a Roman. You'd say something. Paul's like, beat me. Watch what happens. And then they beat him. And he says, you always do this to Roman citizens? And they get freaked out and they call the leaders of the town. They call the politicians, the rulers of the town. And the ruler tells the guard to let him go. Let him go. And the guard says, guess what? They said they're going to let you go. He's like, nope. No, thank you. Tell them to come down here and talk to me themselves. Some of my friends say, well, that's because he wanted justice for what had happened. No, he didn't. He wanted to win the magistrates. He wanted to win the rulers of that city. Because if he started to get the rulers, he began to shift the persecution of Christianity in the region. Do you guys understand that? I minister in India. Do you know India is on the top 10 list of the most dangerous places in the world to minister the gospel? Except for one region. There's one governor who's a Christian, and his region is the only region where it is safe to minister the gospel. Because one leader over the region is a believer, it has stopped the persecution for everyone else in the region. Paul understands that principle. And so he is after that. And the Lord has already spoke to him right here. This is why he's doing it. Why did he appeal to Caesar when he could have been let go? When they came to him and said, Paul, you're going to be arrested. And he said, this is my moment. This is what God has called me to. When they arrest me, I'll appeal to Caesar. And God has said I must stand before Caesar so I can share the gospel. And Paul sees his moment, and he seizes the opportunity. Take me before Caesar. And this angel says, you must stand before Caesar. This is a part of the plan of God over Paul's life. Now, Paul would not see Caesar come to Jesus in his lifetime. But a few hundred years later, Rome becomes the very center of all of Christianity. What Paul is told to do begins to plant a seed that many would water and bring a harvest eventually. Amen? But it came through a persecuted moment. So it says, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who are sailing with you. Oh, they're not going to die either because you need to stand before Caesar, so we're going to go ahead and save all the sailors too. Therefore, keep up your courage, men, for I believe God that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on a certain island. Now, what's interesting about this is that God's only plan was not just for him to make it to Caesar, into Rome. That was his heart's desire. And Paul would spend a long time trying to get to Rome. It was a long process, a big journey for him to eventually get to Rome. But what's interesting about this moment is because of this shipwreck, because of what happened, it says here, not only will I save you because you have to get to Caesar, but he says it will happen exactly as I've been told, but we must run aground on a certain island. See, the angel didn't just tell him that he needed to make it to Caesar, but he also told him, we need to run you aground on a certain island. Now, what if they had waited like Paul had said through the storm? I believe Paul would have ended up on this certain island anyway. It wouldn't have happened by being shipwrecked. They would have just docked there for supplies. But the same thing, God would have brought it around in a different way. But because he was caught in a storm, God uses the storm. Stop thinking that just because you're in a storm means God can't use you. In fact, in the middle of your storm, God can use you to save others in their storm. While you're still in your storm. There are too many people that have counted out their destiny because they say, I can't help anybody because I'm in the middle of a storm. No, grab someone else in the storm, hunker down, and make it together. Somebody better shout me down or something, or I'm going to preach it again. I'll start over at the beginning. I'm just saying right now. Hallelujah. So this morning I want to talk to you about the tale of two... Nobody? I started over. Oh, he was serious. Oh, dang it. So Paul runs aground on on an island called Malta. The ship is torn apart. The ship is totally destroyed, but every man makes it. They want to kill the prisoners, and one of them's like, no, it's not a good idea. Like, we should let them live because of what just happened. And so they let Paul live. They let everyone live. They get aboard, and there was like over 200 of them on the ship. I want you to understand, this was not like a little fishing boat. It's a big ship. This is a big storm that took this down. Over 200 people on this ship. And not a tiny ship. I think in our image, we think of a little thing floating around getting ruined. They threw off all their tackle, all their food. They threw everything. They ate good before they got off. He says, eat the food. We won't need it. So they eat, they get, and if you remember the story, they take some wood and they build a fire. And when the fire gets hot, when Paul goes near the fire and the fire is hot, a viper jumps out of the fire and bites Paul. And all of the locals are waiting around. Oh, this guy just survived a shipwreck and lived. And now a viper jumps out of the fire to get him. He cheated death once, but this man must be a sinner. Because death came for him twice. He's not getting out of this. Come on, how many of us have done that? We've had one thing. We've jumped out of the fire, out of the firing pan and into the fire, and we think this must be punishment for things I've done. Do you ever stop to think that if you're in alignment with God, that maybe God is trying to show off how good he is in the midst of the fire? Man, I got out of the storm and now I'm in the fire and the serpent doesn't seem to leave me alone. It must be because I am unworthy. It must be because you don't see me as, God, where are you in the midst of my trial? And he's like, watch what I do with you if you'll just trust me in the trial. And the snake bites him and he shakes off the snake and nothing happens. And the locals are like, this man is a god. He goes from cursed sinner to God status in a matter of minutes because the venom can't hurt him. The world will mock you and ridicule you and watch for your demise, but the second God shows up in your life, the season will shift suddenly. Don't worry about what they say. Just let them keep watching so when they see the victory and the breakthrough and the miraculous, they have no argument left in them. Please watch me, troll me, harass me, make fun of the video of that. But when they see the fruit of what happens, they will see a good God and they'll have no more argument left in them. I don't delete people off my Facebook. I say, you watch and see. Watch and see. Hate away, but just pay attention. You can say whatever you want. So suddenly, the residents of Malta shifted, and Paul went around healing everyone on the island. They took him to the leaders, and he began to heal the leader, and he healed people all over the island. In fact, did you know this? While Paul was on mission, this was a detour. Sometimes a detour will unlock a destiny you never even dreamed was possible. So what happened was this. Malta all of a sudden said, we like this Jesus. We think we'll do this Jesus thing. Today, in 2022, Malta, the island that Paul was shipwrecked on, the detour to his destiny of Rome, is the most Christian nation on the face of the planet. It has a confessing Christianity rate of 98%. I think that means closer to 100%. That just means like 2% were ticked off that day. No, man, I'm not saying that. There is no satanic church in Malta. There is no Buddhist temple in Malta. There is no Hindu god worship in Malta. It's a Christian nation because they remembered what God did through Paul. So let me say this. I don't know what kind of storm you're facing. I don't know how, when you look at your life, you say, but my life is being torn apart. God is about to use you to change a nation. Stop counting God's plan out of your life. Stop believing that God can't use you to shift the world because your world is falling apart. I know, I get it. Right? They make fun of us. They ridicule us. Ha, ha, ha. Look at this guy, bit by a snake, shipwrecked. Yeah, some God you serve. They look at us. They see things like the baptism. They see things like going up to the altar, and they accuse us of, this is my favorite one. Every time they see an altar where someone falls down when I pray for them, and I'm standing here normal, and they're flopping around like a fish, and I'm like, you're the weirdo. I'm normal. I don't know what your problem is. I don't know why everyone comes at me when I pray for someone, then they act weird. I'm not acting weird. Leave me alone. I'm telling you, visitors, if you're a visitor in here and you're like, what does he mean people act weird? I don't act weird. Watch when I pray. I'm normal. They're weird. Don't judge me. Don't say God's not real. I'm not setting it up. They're not parroting me. I get it. They look at that stuff and they say, that's odd. That's different. That's strange. And here's the truth is the word calls us a peculiar people. Why won't we just own that title with a pride, with a badge that says, yeah, I'm a little peculiar and I'm okay with that. You can call me the odd man out. You can call me the odd duck. I'm okay with that because I'm not trying to be like you. You're not the standard of cool that my life lives up to. I'm not trying to fit in your culture. All right, so you can call me odd. I am odd. We are the odd man out. We are the odd duck. Because here's the truth. We beat the odds. Amen. The odds are ever in our favor. When the odds are stacked against us, we just release the power of God and knock down those odds. So you can say we're odd. But here's the problem is that there's too many Christians that they cave and cower to the world's opinion. They cave and cower to the attack of the serpent. And they believe when they see the enemy